Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The creature wasn't there, and then it was. One moment I was cruising down Route 23 through the Ozarks, radio crackling with static between stations. The next, my headlights caught something tall and gaunt standing in the middle of the road. It moved like nothing I'd ever seen before. Not animal, not human, something else. I swerved hard, my 2006 Toyota Corolla fishtailing across wet asphalt. The world spun, tires screamed, and then came the sickening crunch of metal meeting tree. When the airbag deflated and my ears stopped ringing, I found myself staring through a spiderweb-cracked windshield at the rain-slick forest. The thing I'd swerved to avoid vanished, like it had never existed. My phone showed no service, typical for these backwoods stretches of Arkansas. The engine wouldn't turn over. Just my luck. I was 30 miles outside of Jasper with a totaled car and a storm rolling in. I grabbed my duffel from the back seat and started walking. The rain came down harder, soaking through my jacket within minutes. Every few steps, I'd glance over my shoulder, scanning the tree line. Nothing there but darkness and the persistent feeling of being watched. 2 miles later, I saw the sign, Whispering Pine Motel, vacancy. The neon buzzed and flickered, casting a sickly blue glow across the parking lot. Behind it stood a single-story motel that had seen better days, probably back in the 1970s. Paint peeled from the wood siding. Some of the room numbers hung crooked. Not exactly the Hilton, but my options were limited to this or hypothermia. The front office smelled of cigarettes and pine-scented cleaner. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead, stirring the stale air. Behind the counter, a man with deep-set eyes looked up from a dog-eared paperback. His name tag read, Earl. "Car trouble?" he asked, putting down his book, some thriller with a black cover. Hit a tree trying to avoid. I hesitated. A deer, about 2 miles back. Something flickered across Earl's face. Recognition, concern. It was gone before I could place it. "Happens around here more than you'd think," he said, reaching for a registration card. "Especially at night. Animals act strange near Whispering Pines." As I filled out the form, I noticed a framed list of rules beside the counter. Not the usual no smoking or check out by 11 a.m., but something else entirely. "What's with the rules?" I asked. Earl slid a brass key attached to a pine-shaped keychain across the counter. "Room 17. Been in the motel business 30 years, he said, eyes never quite meeting mine. "Folks appreciate knowing how things run. Nothing unusual about having rules." But there was something in how he said it. Tension in his shoulders, a slight tremor in his hands, that made me think otherwise. "How long you planning to stay?" he asked. "Just tonight. I'll get a tow in the morning." Earl nodded slowly. "Better read those rules careful before you turn in. Some folks around here, they're..." He trailed off, looking past me toward the rain-streaked windows. "They're particular about guests following the house rules." As I headed to my room, key in hand and duffel over my shoulder, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into something I didn't understand. The rain drummed steadily on the metal awning, and somewhere in the dark woods beyond the parking lot, something howled. A sound that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite human. I hurried to room 17, suddenly eager to be behind a locked door. Room 17 smelled of dust and old cigarettes, despite the no smoking sign hanging beside the TV. I dropped my duffel on the faded paisley bedspread and surveyed my shelter for the night. Wood-paneled walls, threadbare carpet, a bathroom with rust stains in the tub. The place was stuck in 1978, and proud of it. At least the heater worked. I cranked it up, peeled off my wet clothes, and changed into dry jeans and a flannel shirt. My ankle throbbed where it had twisted during the crash. Nothing broken, but I'd be limping tomorrow. Thunder crashed outside as I pulled back the heavy curtains. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see the empty parking lot, and beyond it, the wall of pines that gave the motel its name. Something moved at the tree line, just a shadow, there and gone. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Lack of sleep playing tricks on me. I'd been driving 14 hours straight from Chicago, trying to make it to my sister's place in Little Rock by morning. So much for that plan. The room phone rang, startling me. Old-school landline, beige plastic with a curly cord. "Hello? Mr. Daniels?" Earl's voice crackled through the receiver. "Forgot to give you the welcome packet, rules and such. Slipped my mind with the storm and all. I can come get it. No need, it's under your door." I looked down. Sure enough, a manila envelope had been slipped under my door. When had that happened? I hadn't heard footsteps. "You read that before you turn in, all right?" Earl's voice had an edge to it now. Every word. It's important. The line went dead before I could respond. I picked up the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the motel letterhead. The words "Guest Guidelines" printed across the top. Below were 7 numbered rules. Do not leave your room between 1 a.m. and 5:17 a.m. under any circumstances. If you hear knocking at your door during prohibited hours, do not answer. Do not ask who it is. Do not respond in any way. If your television turns on by itself, turn it off immediately. Do not watch what appears on the screen. Keep your curtains closed at night. Do not look outside, even if you hear your name called. The phone will ring once at midnight. Answer it. The caller will ask if you're enjoying your stay. Your response must be, "The pines are lovely this time of year." Water from the bathroom sink is safe between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. only. Use the complimentary bottled water at all other times. If you see a guest with a blue pine tree pin, do not engage in conversation. Alert front desk staff immediately. I read the list twice, waiting for the punchline. Some backwoods humor, a hazing routine for out-of-towners. Whatever it was, the joke fell flat. A handwritten note was scrawled at the bottom. Failure to follow these guidelines releases Whispering Pine Motel from all liability and voids your protection as a registered guest. I tossed the paper onto the nightstand. Small town weirdness, that's all. I'd slept in stranger places during my years on the road as a freelance photographer. After my accident tonight, all I wanted was a hot shower and sleep. The bathroom light flickered as I stepped into the shower. The water pressure was surprisingly good, though the pipes groaned and knocked inside the walls. I stood under the spray, letting heat seep into my sore muscles. A peculiar scratching sound caught my attention. Faint, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging slowly across the bathroom door. I shut off the water, listening. Nothing now but the drip of the faucet and rain against the window. Toweling off quickly, I opened the bathroom door. The room was empty, just as I'd left it. The bedside clock read 11:48 p.m. Less than 15 minutes until the phone would ring, according to those ridiculous rules. I sat on the bed, my skin prickling despite the warmth of the room. The rules were absurd, yet I found myself glancing at the curtains, making sure they were fully closed, checking that the TV was off, placing the bottled water within easy reach. My phone still showed no service. I tried the TV, just static on every channel. The isolation settled over me like a weight. At exactly midnight, the room phone rang. One ring, as promised. I let it tremble on the hook, telling myself this was stupid. But then I remembered Earl's face, the tension in his voice. What if this was some elaborate test? What if they were deciding whether to help me get a tow in the morning? I picked up the receiver. Hello? Silence on the line. Then, a voice that sounded distant and hollow, as if coming from the bottom of a well. Are you enjoying your stay, Mr. Daniels? A chill crept up my spine. How did the caller know my name? I hadn't told Earl my first name when I checked in. The pines are lovely this time of year, I replied, feeling foolish. The voice exhaled, a long hiss of what sounded like relief. Good. Remember the rules, Mr. Daniels. Your life depends on it. The line went dead. I replaced the receiver slowly, my hand trembling slightly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sudden silence was worse somehow, making each creak of the old building echo in the stillness. 1 a.m. now. The prohibited hours had begun. Despite myself, I double-checked the door lock and safety chain. As I lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong at Whispering Pine Motel, and that those strange rules might be the only thing keeping me safe until morning. Sleep came in fitful bursts, broken by strange noises that might have been dreams. The old heater clicked and hissed. Rain resumed, pattering against the roof. Normal sounds, I told myself. I woke suddenly at 2:43 a.m. according to the glowing red digits on the bedside clock. Something had pulled me from sleep. A sound, a feeling. The room felt different somehow. Colder. The air had a strange weight to it, pressing against my skin. Then I heard it. A soft, persistent knocking at my door. Rule number 2 flashed in my mind. If you hear knocking during prohibited hours, do not answer. Do not ask who it is. Do not respond in any way. The knocking continued, gentle but insistent. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. Pause. I lay frozen, barely breathing. This was ridiculous. Probably just another guest who had the wrong room. Hello? A woman's voice called through the door. Is anyone in there? My car broke down. I need to use a phone. Her voice sounded strange, flat, like someone trying to remember how worry should sound. My instinct was to help, but the rules. Please, the voice continued. I know someone's in there. I can see your light. My light? I hadn't left any lights on. I turned my head slowly. The bathroom light was on, though I distinctly remembered turning it off before bed. It's raining again, the voice said. I'm getting soaked out here. The rain had stopped 20 minutes ago. I could see the dry parking lot through a crack in the curtains. The knocking grew louder, more forceful. Open the door. The woman's voice hardened, dropping an octave. Open it now. I remained silent, heart hammering in my chest. The doorknob rattled violently. The safety chain snapped taut. I know you're awake, James Daniels. The voice wasn't trying to sound human anymore. It came out distorted, multi-layered. The rules can't protect you forever. Eventually, you'll make a mistake. How did it know my first name? The rattling stopped abruptly. Silence stretched for several minutes. When I finally worked up the courage to peer through the peephole, the walkway outside my door was empty. I retreated to the bed, pulling the covers up like a child afraid of monsters. Sleep seemed impossible now, but exhaustion eventually pulled me under. The television clicked on at 4:06 a.m. Static filled the screen, bathing the room in pulsing gray light. Within the static, shapes began to form. I scrambled for the remote, remembering Rule 3. As my fingers closed around the remote, the static cleared momentarily. On screen was an image of myself, asleep in this very bed. The footage couldn't have been more than an hour old. I jabbed the power button, The screen went black. Sweat trickled down my back as I sat in the darkness, listening to the silence. The rules weren't a joke. Whatever was happening at Whispering Pines went beyond small-town eccentricity. I wouldn't sleep again tonight. I grabbed my phone, planning to distract myself with old photos until dawn, but paused when I saw I had 1 bar of reception. When had that happened? I quickly dialed my sister's number. "James?" Sarah answered, her voice thick with sleep. "It's 4 in the morning. What's wrong?" "My car crashed near Jasper. I'm stuck at this motel." "Jasper? In the Ozarks?" She sounded more alert now. "Which motel?" "Whispering Pines. A sharp intake of breath. Get out of there." "What? Why?" "That place." Static overwhelmed her voice. "Sarah, you're breaking up." "Local legend." More static. "Disappearances." The call dropped. 1 bar of reception still showed on my screen, but when I tried calling back, the call wouldn't connect. Outside my window, something moved in the parking lot. A figure stood beneath the buzzing neon sign, staring at my room. Though I couldn't make out features in the darkness, I knew it was watching me. Don't look outside, even if you hear your name called. Rule 4 echoed in my mind. As if hearing my thoughts, the figure raised an arm and beckoned to me. "James," a voice whispered, somehow audible through the closed window. It sounded like Sarah. "James, I'm here to help you. Come outside." I backed away from the window, heart pounding. That wasn't my sister. The digital clock flipped to 5:17 a.m. The prohibited hours had ended, according to the rules. Dawn wasn't far off. I waited 10 minutes, then cautiously peeked outside again. The parking lot was empty. No sign of the figure or anything unusual. With trembling hands, I packed my few belongings. As soon as it was light enough, I'd walk to the nearest town if necessary. Anything to get away from Whispering Pines. The bathroom sink sputtered when I turned it on. The water ran clear, but I remembered Rule 6 and reached for the bottled water instead. As I brushed my teeth, I studied my reflection in the spotted mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, stubble on my jaw. I looked like I'd aged years overnight. A movement in the mirror caught my eye. Something behind me shifted in the shower curtain. I spun around, heart racing. Nothing there. When I turned back to the mirror, a woman stood behind my reflection. Pale skin, dark, hollow eyes, wet black hair plastered to her skull. Water dripped from her sodden clothes, forming a puddle on the bathroom floor. Except when I glanced down, the real floor was dry. I stumbled backward, knocking over the complimentary toiletries. When I looked at the mirror again, the woman was gone. At 6:30 a.m., I stepped outside my room for the first time since check-in. The morning air was cool and misty. Birds chirped in the pines. Everything seemed so normal in the daylight. The office lights were on. Through the window, I could see Earl at the front desk, reading his paperback like nothing strange had happened overnight. A black pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, the word Towson's painted on the driver's door. A burly man in overalls stepped out, scanning the motel rooms. "You Daniels?" he called when he spotted me. "Earl called about your car. Said you hit a tree on Route 23? Relief washed over me. My escape route had arrived. "That's me," I confirmed, walking toward him. "How soon can we get my car towed?" "Let's go take a look now. Probably have you on your way by noon." As we walked to his truck, I noticed a woman seated inside the diner attached to the motel. She wore a waitress uniform, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Nothing unusual about her except for the small blue pine tree pin fastened to her collar. Rule 7 flashed through my mind. If you see a guest with a blue pine tree pin, do not engage in conversation. Alert front desk staff immediately. She looked up suddenly, meeting my gaze through the window. Her lips curled into a smile that stretched too wide across her face. "Coming?" the tow truck driver asked, holding the passenger door open. I hesitated, glancing between the diner and the front office where Earl sat. "Actually," I said, "I need to speak to the motel manager first. Can you wait 5 minutes?" The driver shrugged. "Sure thing. I'll get the paperwork started." I hurried toward the office, feeling the waitress's eyes burning into my back with every step. The office bell jingled as I pushed through the door. Earl looked up, his face neutral except for the tightness around his eyes. "Mr. Daniels, sleep well?" "We need to talk about those rules," I said, keeping my voice low. "And about the woman in the diner wearing that blue pine tree pin." Earl's expression didn't change, but his hands stilled on his book. He glanced past me, through the window toward the diner, then stood abruptly. "Come with me." He led me through a door marked private, into a cluttered back office. Newspaper clippings covered one wall, missing persons reports, dozens of them, yellowed with age. The oldest dated back to 1973. "You followed the rules," Earl said, closing the door. "That's good. Most folks brush them off as backwoods nonsense. Those folks don't check out. What's happening here? Who was knocking at my door last night? And that waitress?" "That's not a waitress," Earl cut in. "And I'd bet good money nobody knocked on your door last night. Not anyone human, anyway." My mouth went dry. "Then what?" "Skinwalkers," Earl said simply, as if naming a local bird species. "That's what the Cherokee called them. Creatures that can wear human skin, mimic human voices. Been in these mountains long before white settlers arrived." I almost laughed. Almost. But the knocking, the voice that knew my name, the figure in the mirror, they weren't so funny in retrospect. That's insane. "Tell me what happened last night," Earl said. I hesitated, then related the events. The knocking, the TV, the phone call, the figure in the parking lot. With each detail, Earl nodded as if confirming a familiar story. "Classic trickster behavior," he said when I'd finished. "They want in. Into your room, into your head. They've got rules of their own, see? Can't enter without invitation. Can't harm you unless you break the protections." "Protections? You mean those ridiculous guidelines?" Earl's jaw tightened. "My grandfather built this motel in 1965. First night it opened, something tried to get in. Something wearing his dead wife's face. He survived because a Cherokee elder taught him the rules. They're not guidelines, Mr. Daniels. They're a barrier." He walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a dusty folder, and spread more newspaper clippings on his desk. Highway 23 cuts through old hunting grounds, sacred places. The skinwalkers were here first, and they don't take kindly to trespassers. Most times they stick to the deep woods, but sometimes they get hungry. That's when they hunt. The headlines told a grim story. "Tourist vanishes on Ozark Highway, 1979. 3 hikers missing near Jasper, 1986. Family of 4 disappears. Abandoned car found, 1994. "What about that blue pin?" I asked. "They mark their own," Earl said quietly. "Anyone wearing that pin isn't human anymore. They've been replaced. That's what happens to the missing people. They get replaced." Earl nodded. "Sometimes. The smart ones look for clean kills. Tourists, drifters. Folks nobody local would know well enough to spot the difference. The creatures wearing those skins help lure more victims." My pulse raced. The tow truck driver, Terry Towson? Born and raised here. Known him 40 years. He's human. Earl paused. "Unless you saw a blue pin?" "No pin," I said, relieved. "Good. He'll get you to Newton's Auto in Jasper. Bobby Newton's solid. He'll fix your car." Earl hesitated. "But there's a problem. That thing you hit last night wasn't no deer." "I know. You wounded one of them. That's why they came knocking. That's why they're so eager to get to you. You marked yourself as a threat." My stomach dropped. "But I'm leaving. Getting my car fixed." "They don't forget, Mr. Daniels. And they know you're sent now." Earl rubbed his jaw. "There's a man in Jasper. Caleb White. Lives in a cabin up Turner Ridge. He deals with these situations." "You're saying I'm being hunted?" Earl nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I'm saying." A knock at the office door made us both jump. Terry, the tow truck driver, poked his head in. "Ready when you are, Mr. Daniels. Found your car right where Earl said. Radiator's busted, but frame looks okay. We can tow it in. Have you fixed up by tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow. Another night in Jasper." "Can you recommend a motel in town?" I asked Terry, watching his face carefully. "Somewhere nice?" "Johnson Inn on Main Street's your best bet. Clean rooms, fair prices. Owner's my cousin Maggie." Earl nodded almost imperceptibly. A confirmation. "That'll work," I said. "Let's go." As we headed out, Earl pressed a small leather pouch into my hand. "Protection," he whispered. "Salt, sage, iron filings. Keep it with you. And if you stay another night anywhere in Newton County, follow the rules. I'll call ahead to Maggie. She'll give you their version." "There are rules everywhere?" I asked incredulously. "Different places, different rules, but the same purpose." Earl's eyes darted to the diner, where the blonde waitress stood in the window watching us. "They're ancient things, Mr. Daniels. They've adapted to this world, learned to hunt in it. We've had to adapt too." I climbed into Terry's truck, the leather pouch clutched tightly in my hand. As we pulled away, I watched the waitress in the side mirror. She raised her hand in a mocking wave, her smile stretching wider than any human mouth should. "Mind if we stop by my crash site?" I asked Terry. "There's camera equipment I need to grab from my car." "Sure thing. It's on the way." 20 minutes later, we pulled onto the shoulder near where my car had veered off the road. The Toyota was wedged against a pine tree, its front end crumpled. My camera case was thankfully intact in the trunk. As Terry hooked up the tow chains, I surveyed the scene. Morning light filtered through the trees, making the forest seem benign, even beautiful. Hard to believe anything sinister lurked among those pines. Then I saw it, a trail of dark stains leading from the road into the underbrush. Too dark for engine oil, too viscous. "What's that?" Terry asked, following my gaze. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just forest debris." Terry wasn't fooled. He squatted beside the stains, careful not to touch them. "That's blood, but not like any animal blood I've seen." It was black, with an oily sheen that caught the light. A few yards into the woods, something pale gleamed among the fallen leaves. I stepped closer. A fragment of what looked like bone, but wrong somehow. Too porous, too light. "We should go," Terry said, suddenly anxious. "Now." Back in the truck, Terry drove faster than necessary, constantly checking his mirrors. "You know about them," I said. Not a question. Terry's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Everyone who grows up here knows. Some believe, some don't. Until they see something they can't explain. Have you? Seen something?" He was quiet for a long moment. "My brother. 10 years ago. We were hunting. Got separated. When I found him, he wasn't right. Looked like him, talked like him. But little things were off. The way he held his coffee cup. The phrases he used. What happened to him? He moved to Colorado according to what walks around wearing his face. Calls mom every Christmas. Sends gifts that smell like wet fur. Terry's voice was flat. Real Mike's out there in those woods somewhere, or what's left of him. Jasper appeared ahead, a small town nestled in the valley. Normal-looking shops lined Main Street. People walked dogs, chatted outside the post office, carried groceries to their cars. The mundane scene was jarring after the night I'd experienced. "How do you live with it?" I asked, "knowing what's out there?" Terry pulled up in front of Newton's auto shop. "Same way folks live with bears or tornadoes. You learn the warning signs. You take precautions. You pray it's someone else they take." He caught my horrified expression and shrugged. "I'm just being honest. Now, you mentioned you're a photographer. What brings you through these parts?" "Assignment for Outdoor America magazine. Hiking trails in the Ozarks." Terry's face darkened. "Cancel it. Go back to Chicago. Tell them you got sick, car trouble, whatever. Just don't go in those woods again. These things, they're only active at night. Mostly. They don't like direct sunlight. But dawn and dusk are hunting hours, and they're always watching." He handed me his business card. "Maggie's place is 3 blocks up on the right. You need anything while you're here, you call me." As I gathered my bags, Terry added, "And Mr. Daniels?" I'd steer clear of Caleb White if I were you. Man knows things, sure enough. But knowledge like that comes with a price. I watched Terry drive my damaged car into the shop bay, wondering what kind of place I'd stumbled into and whether I'd make it out alive. Johnson Inn stood on Jasper's Main Street, a 2-story Victorian converted into a bed and breakfast. Hanging baskets of petunias decorated the wraparound porch. A handwritten vacancy sign hung in the window. Normal, quaint, nothing like the unsettling Whispering Pines. The foyer smelled of cinnamon and furniture polish. A small reception desk sat beneath an ornate staircase. Photos of smiling families lined the walls. The place looked like it had been featured in a small-town tourism brochure. "You must be Mr. Daniels," a woman said, emerging from a back room. Maggie Johnson was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Earl called about you. Said you had car trouble." "That's right," I replied, studying her carefully. No blue pine tree pin in sight. Terry from Towson's brought me into town. My car should be fixed by tomorrow. "Well, you're welcome here for the night," Maggie said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She slid a registration card across the desk. "We've got a nice room on the 2nd floor, east-facing, so you'll get the morning sun." As I filled out the form, I noticed a framed needlepoint hanging behind the desk. It looked decorative at first glance. A floral border surrounding what appeared to be a poem. Looking closer, I realized it was another set of rules. Salt lines are maintained at all thresholds. Do not disturb them. Breakfast is served from 7 to 9 a.m. Do not eat food left outside these hours. The 2nd floor bathroom is for guests only. The 3rd floor is off limits. If you hear singing after sunset, close your shutters and play the radio provided in your room. All guests must be in their rooms with doors locked by 10 p.m. Maggie followed my gaze. "Family traditions," she said lightly. "My grandmother was superstitious. Started as a joke, but now it's part of our charm." Her tone suggested otherwise. "Terry mentioned your cousins," I said, handing back the completed form. "Since birth," she confirmed. "Our families go back 5 generations in Jasper." She reached for a key from a wall of hooks. "Room 4, top of the stairs, 2nd door on the right. Bathrooms at the end of the hall. You're my only guest tonight, so you'll have it to yourself." She handed me the key, then hesitated. "Earl mentioned you had an incident on the highway." "You could say that." Maggie's expression softened. Those rules I mentioned, they're not for show, Mr. Daniels. Not in this town. I'm beginning to understand that. Good. She reached under the counter and produced a small canvas bag. Bath salts. Add them to your bath water if you use the tub. Family recipe. The bag smelled strongly of herbs and minerals. Thank you, I said, taking it. Between this and Earl's pouch, I was accumulating quite the collection of folk remedies. Is there somewhere in town I can get lunch? Dottie's diner across the street is good, just... She lowered her voice. If your server has any sort of pine-shaped jewelry, ask for someone else. My appetite diminished significantly. Noted. And Mr. Daniels? If you're still thinking of contacting Caleb White, don't. Not unless you're truly desperate. That was the second warning about White. My curiosity piqued. What's his story? Maggie looked uncomfortable. He wasn't always a hermit. Used to be the high school science teacher until his wife and daughter disappeared in '97. He spent months searching the mountains. When he came back, he knew things. Things nobody should know. He found the skinwalkers. Maggie flinched at the word. We don't use that name in town. Bad luck. She touched a small silver brooch on her collar, a protection symbol of some kind. But yes, he found them, or they found him. Either way, he's not quite right anymore. Keeps to himself mostly, except when someone needs his particular expertise. I thanked her and headed upstairs to my room. It was cozy. Floral wallpaper, handmade quilt on the bed, antique furnishings. A far cry from the dated wood paneling of Whispering Pines, yet somehow just as unsettling. These cheerful trappings covered the same dark reality. After washing up, I walked to Dottie's diner. The hostess wore no suspicious jewelry, nor did my server, a teenager named Kyle with Acme and a Newton High School football hoodie. The normalcy was almost jarring after the night I'd experienced. While waiting for my burger, I browsed local information on my phone, which now had full reception. Newton County had a population of just under 8,000. Jasper, the county seat, housed about 500 of those. The area's main draw was outdoor recreation. Hiking, fishing, canoeing on the Buffalo River. I found nothing about skinwalkers or disappearances in the official history, though missing persons statistics for the county were notably higher than national averages. The tourism website glossed over local legends, mentioning only vague Cherokee influences and rich folkloric traditions. My photography instincts kicked in. There was a story here, a real one beneath the tourist-friendly veneer. People living with predators in their midst. Generations of unspoken rules and rituals designed to ward off creatures that the modern world pretended didn't exist. After lunch, I walked to Newton's Auto to check on my car. Bobby Newton, a wiry man with grease-stained hands, confirmed what Terry had told me. Radiator's shot. Got a replacement coming from Fayetteville tomorrow morning. Frame needs some straightening, too. He wiped his hands on a rag. Terry said you hit a deer? Something like that. Bobby's eyes narrowed slightly. Funny thing, no fur or blood on the impact site, just some black residue I can't quite identify. I changed the subject quickly. Any chance of getting it done today? I'm sort of in a hurry. Sorry, no can do. Parts won't arrive till morning. You staying at Maggie's? I nodded. You'll be fine there, he said with forced brightness. Maggie runs a tight ship. Just don't wander after dark. Back at the inn, I spent the afternoon reviewing photos from previous assignments and researching the area more thoroughly. Old forum posts and community websites mentioned local legends, stories of shapeshifters and tricksters in the woods. Most comments dismissed these as hillbilly superstitions, but a few contained warnings that felt genuine, references to rules, protective measures, ways to identify them. Around 4 p.m., I dozed off in the armchair by the window. When I woke, the sun was setting, casting long orange rays through the lace curtains. My phone showed 6:22 p.m. A soft knock at my door startled me fully awake. "Mr. Daniels?" Maggie called. "Dinner's ready if you're interested. I made pot roast." My stomach growled. I'd planned to grab something in town, but home-cooked food sounded better. "I'll be right down." The dining room featured a large oak table set for two. Maggie brought out steaming plates of pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. "I don't usually cook for guests," she explained, "but I was making it for myself anyway, and it seemed silly not to offer." The food was delicious. As we ate, Maggie shared stories about Jasper, its history, its characters, its gradual decline as young people moved away to cities. Normal conversation that almost made me forget the abnormal situation. Until she asked, "Did you really hit one of them with your car?" I put down my fork. "Earl told you?" "Terry did. Word travels fast here." She refilled my water glass. "They'll be watching you now. They don't like being wounded." "So I've heard." Maggie studied me. "You're taking this remarkably well. Most outsiders think we're crazy. After what I experienced at Whispering Pines, I'd be crazy not to believe." She nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to live somewhere else. Somewhere normal where the rules are simple. Don't talk to strangers. Lock your doors at night." She sighed. "But this is home. You adapt." After dinner, I helped clear the dishes. Through the kitchen window, I could see the sun had fully set. Night had fallen over Jasper. "You should head upstairs," Maggie said, checking the clock. "Remember? All guests in rooms with doors locked by 10 p.m. I finished. "I remember." "Good. Sleep well, Mr. Daniels." As I climbed the stairs to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. From somewhere in the distance came the haunting notes of a song, ethereal and ancient, neither male nor female, drifting on the night breeze. I quickly shut my window shutters and turned on the bedside radio as instructed. A local country station crackled through the speakers, drowning out the singing outside. Some rules I was learning were worth following. Morning sunlight streamed through the lace curtains when I woke. For a moment, I could almost believe the events of the past 2 days were a bizarre dream. The creature on the road, the strange rules, the stories of skinwalkers. Then I noticed the salt line at my door, undisturbed from the night before. I showered and dressed quickly. The hallway clock showed 7:30 a.m. Breakfast would be waiting downstairs, according to the rules. Maggie bustled around the dining room, setting out plates of scrambled eggs, bacon, and biscuits. A pot of coffee steamed on the sideboard. "Sleep well?" she asked as I entered. "Better than at Whispering Pines," I admitted. No surprise there. She poured me coffee. Earl's place sits on an old crossing point. The veil's thinner there. Veil? Between our world and theirs, some places it's like tissue paper. Others it's brick wall strong. She settled across from me with her own coffee. Johnson Inn sits on consecrated ground. Methodist Church stood here before the Civil War. I added cream to my coffee. So they can't come in? They can't step foot on the property without invitation, unlike Earl's place where they can at least reach the doors and windows. She buttered a biscuit. But protection isn't perfect. They're clever. Find loopholes. Like wearing human faces? She nodded grimly. Wearing a human gives them passage to places normally denied. That's why we watch for the pins. Why do they mark themselves with those pins? They don't. We do. Anyone confirmed compromised gets reported. Description circulates. Blue pine becomes a warning sign. Maggie sipped her coffee. Sometimes family can't bear to handle the situation, so we warn each other instead. The implication hummed heavy. These weren't just folklore to these people. They were a community under siege, developing systems to survive. "What about your car?" Maggie asked, changing the subject. "Should be ready this morning. I'll check after breakfast." "And then you're leaving?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. "That's the plan. Smart plan." She refilled my cup, though they've been known to follow people, especially ones who've caught their interest. My appetite vanished. "How far do they follow?" "Depends how much you've angered them." Maggie frowned. "You said you hit one? Wounded it?" I nodded. "Then I'd put serious distance between you and Newton County, and I wouldn't drive alone after dark for a while." After breakfast, I packed my bag and checked out. Maggie refused payment. "Consider it Ozark hospitality," she insisted. "Just promise you'll be careful, and if you ever pass this way again..." "I know. Follow the rules." She smiled thinly. "The rules keep us alive, Mr. Daniels." The morning was bright and clear. Perfect weather for driving back to civilization. I walked to Newton's auto shop, eager to retrieve my car and put this nightmare behind me. The garage was quiet when I arrived. No sign of Bobby or any mechanics. The office door stood ajar. "Hello?" I called, stepping inside. "Anyone here?" No answer. My Toyota sat in the work bay, hood open. The damaged radiator had been removed, but no replacement had been installed. Tools lay scattered on a nearby workbench, as if the mechanic had stepped away mid-job. Something felt wrong. The air inside the garage had a strange scent, like wet fur and spoiled meat. "Bobby?" I tried again, moving cautiously through the office toward the shop floor. "Terry?" A soft thud came from the supply closet behind the counter. I froze, listening. Another thud. Then a muffled sound, like someone trying to speak through a gag. I grabbed a heavy wrench from the counter and approached the closet. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. Every instinct screamed danger, but if someone was hurt... I yanked the door open, wrench raised defensively. Bobby Newton lay bound on the floor, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. His eyes widened when he saw me, and he made urgent noises through the duct tape covering his mouth. I knelt quickly, peeling the tape away as gently as possible. "Behind you," he gasped. I spun around. A figure wearing blue coveralls stood in the office doorway. One of the mechanics I'd glimpsed yesterday. His name tag read, Dave. On his chest gleamed a small blue pine tree pin. "Car's not quite ready," he said, his voice oddly inflected, like someone speaking a language they'd only recently learned. "Need to order more parts." I tightened my grip on the wrench. "Where's Terry?" The thing wearing Dave's face smiled. The expression didn't fit his features, as if the muscles weren't responding properly. Terry stepped out. Family emergency. His head tilted at an odd angle. "You can wait in the office. Shouldn't be long." "I think I'll come back later," I said, helping Bobby to his feet. "That won't work for us." More figures appeared behind him. 3 people, each wearing that telltale blue pine tree pin. A teenage girl in a waitress uniform, an elderly man with a fishing hat, a woman in a postal service uniform. They blocked the only exit. "You damaged one of our scouts," the thing in Dave's skin said, voice hardening. "We require compensation." Bobby's hand closed around my wrist. "Supply exit," he whispered. "Through the parts room. Run." I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the door to the parts storage area, dragging Bobby with me. Behind us, the creatures wearing human faces moved with uncanny speed, no longer bothering to mimic human movement patterns. The parts room was a maze of shelves stocked with automotive supplies. We weaved through them toward a metal door marked emergency exit at the back. "They killed Dave yesterday," Bobby panted as we ran. "Took his face. Been watching the shop since, waiting for you." I slammed into the exit bar, pushing the door open. Sunlight and fresh air greeted us. We emerged into the alley behind the auto shop. "My truck," Bobby gasped, pointing to a battered Ford pickup. "Keys in my pocket." I helped him fish out the keys with his bound hands, then cut his restraints using a box cutter from his belt. We piled into the truck, just as the creatures burst through the exit door behind us. Bobby gunned the engine. The truck fishtailed out of the alley onto a side street, tires squealing on pavement. "Where to?" he asked, breathing hard. "Highway," I said instinctively. "Get me out of town." "They'll follow. Not safe." He shook his head. "Only one place in Jasper they won't go." Before I could ask where, Bobby swung the truck onto a steep road heading up into the forested hills above town. "Turner Ridge," he explained. "Caleb White's place. Maggie warned me about him. Maggie's smart. White's dangerous." Bobby wiped blood from his eye with his sleeve. "But right now, he's our only option." The road wound higher into the Ozark Hills, the pavement eventually giving way to gravel. Pine forests crowded close on both sides. I checked the side mirror constantly, but saw no pursuit. "Why aren't they following?" I asked. "They are," Bobby said grimly. "Just not in a way we can see. They move through the trees, place to place, like they're folding space." 10 minutes later, we pulled up to a small cabin perched on the mountainside. Solar panels gleamed on the metal roof. A large garden filled the clearing beside it, ringed by what looked like wind chimes made of bones and feathers. "What are those?" I asked, pointing to the strange mobiles. "Warnings, alarms." Bobby killed the engine. "White's got his own rules up here." The cabin door opened before we reached it. A tall, lean man with a silver beard and piercing blue eyes regarded us from the threshold. Caleb White looked to be in his 60s, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt. A shotgun rested casually in the crook of his arm. "Bobby Newton," he acknowledged, then fixed his gaze on me. "And you're the one who hit the scout." "James Daniels," I said, surprised. "How did you—" "News travels. Especially that kind." White stepped back, gesturing us inside. "You've got about 10 minutes before they circle around to my western boundary. That's the weak spot in my perimeter." The cabin interior was a peculiar blend of scientific laboratory and wilderness survival camp. Bookshelves overflowed with texts on biology, folklore, and theoretical physics. A ham radio setup occupied one corner. Jars of preserved specimens lined a set of shelves. Things I couldn't immediately identify and wasn't sure I wanted to. White set down his shotgun and pulled a first aid kit from a cabinet. "Sit," he ordered Bobby, pointing to a chair at the kitchen table. "Let me see that head wound." As he cleaned Bobby's injury, White addressed me without looking up. "You want to know why they're hunting you?" It wasn't a question. "Yes. You damaged one. But more importantly, you saw it. Its true form, between shapes. They don't like being seen. I only got a glimpse. A glimpse is enough." White applied antiseptic to Bobby's cut. "You ever wonder why most cryptid photos are blurry? It's not always bad photography. Some things resist being captured, being defined. Their power lies in ambiguity." He bandaged Bobby's forehead with practiced efficiency, then turned to face me directly. What exactly did you see on that road? I described the tall, gaunt figure that had appeared in my headlights, the strange movement, the way it vanished after I crashed. White nodded. You interrupted a transformation. Lucky or unlucky, depending how you look at it. Can you help me? They followed me to town. They'll probably follow me home. Chicago, right? Photographer. White smiled thinly at my surprise. Like I said, news travels. Small towns run on information. He moved to a map pinned to the wall, a topographical chart of Newton County, with strange symbols marked at various locations. They're territorial, he explained. Power wanes the further they get from their anchor points. By St. Louis, you'd be mostly safe. By Chicago, completely. Mostly isn't reassuring. Nothing about this situation should be reassuring, Mr. Daniels. White's tone was matter of fact. You've stumbled into a predator-prey relationship that's existed in these hills for centuries. You're not the first. Won't be the last. A series of chimes sounded from outside, a warning signal from those bone mobiles. White moved quickly to the window. They're approaching from the west, as expected. He reached for his shotgun. Bobby, get the box from under the sink, red lid. Bobby retrieved a metal container roughly the size of a shoebox. White opened it, revealing vials of powder, bundles of herbs, and what looked like charred animal bones. Protection kit, White explained, handing me a small vial of reddish powder. Iron oxide, silver shavings, and other ingredients. Creates a barrier they can't cross. It won't stop them for long, but it might buy you enough time to reach your car and get out of town. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. And here are the highway rules. Follow them until you're at least 100 miles from here. I unfolded the paper, scanning the handwritten list. Drive only during daylight hours. Keep all windows closed, no matter the heat. If your radio changes stations by itself, turn it off immediately. Don't pick up hitchhikers, no matter how desperate or familiar they appear. If you see the same vehicle 3 times, exit the highway and find a church. Don't stop if someone rear-ends you. Drive to the nearest populated area. If you see a deer or animal with a blue marking, accelerate. Memorize those, White said. They'll keep you alive. The bone chimes rattled more aggressively outside. They're here, White said, moving away from the window. Side yard, edge of the perimeter. I peered through the glass. At first, I saw nothing but trees and White's garden. Then movement caught my eye, figures standing just beyond the ring of bone chimes. They remained partially obscured by the foliage, but I could make out 4 distinct shapes. One was the false Dave from the auto shop. Beside him stood the waitress, the elderly man, and the postal worker. They didn't advance past the boundary. They simply watched, faces blank and expressionless. Why don't they come closer? I asked. My fence line is warded, White explained. Salt, iron, silver, ash from a lightning-struck oak, plus other items I've collected over the years. He tapped his temple. Knowledge is protection, Mr. Daniels. The more you understand them, the better you can defend against them. Tell me everything you know, I said. White smiled grimly. That would take weeks, and you don't have weeks. He checked his watch. You've got about 6 hours of daylight left. Need to get you back to your car and on the road before sunset. What happens at sunset? Their hunting forms emerge. The human disguises are for infiltration, information gathering. At night, they hunt in their true forms. Bobby, who had been silent since arriving, finally spoke. Never seen one at night. Not and lived to tell about it. I have, White said quietly. Cost me everything to survive that encounter. He pulled a journal from a bookshelf and opened it to pages filled with detailed drawings. The sketches depicted creatures that resembled humans only in the broadest sense. Elongated limbs, strangely jointed, with features that seemed to shift between panels as if the artist couldn't quite capture their true appearance. Their physical form operates under different rules, White explained. Their bodies don't respect our physics. That's why they move wrong when wearing human skin. They're translating their natural movement patterns into our physical limitations. What do they want? I asked, studying the disturbing images. Food, territory, entertainment. White closed the journal. They were here long before humans. They regard us as we might regard livestock. Some they hunt for sustenance, others they toy with. The cruelest ones wear our loved ones' skins and watch us break from the deception. Like your family, I said softly, remembering Maggie's story. Something hardened in White's eyes. Yes, like my family. Bobby shifted uncomfortably. We need to get moving. Daylight's burning. White nodded. He's right. They won't stay passive for long. They're gathering strength, testing my boundaries. He moved to a chest in the corner of the room and pulled out what looked like a hunting rifle, but modified with unusual attachments. Silver rounds, he explained, loading the weapon. Won't kill them, but causes enough pain to drive them back temporarily. I thought silver was for werewolves, I said, immediately feeling foolish. Folktales mix and match protective elements, White replied without judgment. Silver, iron, salt, they all have properties that disrupt certain energy patterns. These creatures have similar vulnerabilities, though the details differ from the stories. He handed the rifle to Bobby, then passed me a hunting knife and a leather sheath. Iron blade, silver inlay. Keep it close. So, what's the plan? I asked, attaching the knife to my belt. I'll create a distraction, White said. Draw them toward the eastern boundary. You two circle around the west side, take my jeep. He tossed Bobby a set of keys. Get back to Newton's, fix his car, and get him out of here. They'll follow me, I protested. Put you all in danger. They'll follow regardless, White countered. But with proper precautions, you can outrun them. Their power diminishes with distance from these mountains. He handed me a small cloth bag. Hang this from your rearview mirror. It'll mask your scent for about 100 miles. Bobby checked the rifle. What kind of distraction are we talking about? White smiled thinly. The kind that reminds them why they avoid my property. He moved to a cabinet and removed a metal canister about the size of a coffee can. Mixture of their weaknesses in aerosol form. Burns them like acid. You've been preparing for this, I observed. I've been preparing for 25 years, White corrected. Since they took my Jenny and Maria. Spent every day learning their weaknesses, their habits, their limitations. His voice was matter-of-fact, emotionless. This will be my 137th direct confrontation. The magnitude of his vendetta struck me. This man had dedicated his life to fighting these creatures, to understanding them, to hurting them whenever possible. Why stay here? I asked. If they're bound to this region, why not just leave? White's expression darkened. Because they still wear my wife and daughter. Because they parade them through town during festivals and celebrations, wearing their faces like masks, watching me from across the street. His voice remained steady despite the pain in his eyes. And because someone needs to know how to fight them. Someone needs to remember the rules. Someone needs to help fools like you who stumble into their territory. He checked his watch again. Enough talk. Get ready to move when you hear the first shot. Take the path behind the woodshed. It circles around to where the jeep is hidden. Bobby nodded, checking the rifle one last time. What about Dave and the others at the shop? Dead, White said bluntly. Nothing left to save. Those things wearing their faces need to be dealt with, but that's a problem for another day. He handed us each a small radio. Channel 3, emergency only. They can detect electronic signals, so use sparingly. White moved to the door, grabbing a backpack and slinging it over his shoulder. He paused, looking back at us. Rules are survival, Mr. Daniels. Out there, in town, on the highway. Follow them exactly, no matter how arbitrary they seem. They're written in blood and loss. His gaze intensified. And if you make it back to Chicago, remember what you learned here. These mountains aren't the only places in the world. With that troubling thought, he slipped outside, moving with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to danger. Bobby and I watched through the window as White circled toward the eastern side of his property. The skinwalkers tracked his movement, heads turning in uncanny unison. He's drawing them away, Bobby whispered. Get ready. The crack of a rifle shot split the air. A flare arced high above the trees on the eastern perimeter, burning with an eerie blue-green light. The skinwalkers jerked toward the sound, momentarily distracted. Now, Bobby hissed, pushing open the back door. We sprinted across the yard toward the path White had indicated. Behind us, more shots rang out, followed by an inhuman shrieking that set my teeth on edge. White's distraction was working, painfully effective against our pursuers. The narrow trail wound through dense underbrush before opening into a small clearing where an olive-green Jeep sat beneath a camouflage tarp. Bobby yanked the covering off and jumped into the driver's seat. Get in! He shouted, turning the key. I barely had the passenger door closed when Bobby threw the Jeep into gear, accelerating down a rough track that appeared to be more game trail than road. Hang on, he warned as we bounced violently over roots and rocks, shortcut down the ridge. The Jeep lurched and slid down the steep incline, branches whipping against the windshield. Bobby handled the vehicle with the skill of someone who'd grown up driving mountain roads, but even so, my knuckles turned white, gripping the door handle. You think White will be okay? I asked as we careened around a sharp bend. He's survived this long, Bobby replied, not taking his eyes off the treacherous path. Man's got 9 lives, plus whatever deals he's made with things you don't want to know about. The comment hung ominously between us as we emerged onto a wider dirt road that eventually connected with the paved route back to town. Bobby drove well above the speed limit, constantly checking the mirrors. I kept my eyes on the dense forest flanking the road, watching for any sign of pursuit. What did he mean about thin places? I asked. There are spots all over the world where the boundary between realities wears thin, Bobby explained, taking a sharp curve without slowing. Locals develop rules to navigate them, survival strategies passed down through generations. Like, don't go in the woods after dark. Exactly. But each place has its own dangers, its own specific rules. He glanced at me. Those creatures in our woods might be called skinwalkers here, but they have different names elsewhere. La Llorona, Baba Yaga, the Fair Folk. The broader implications chilled me. What I'd thought was an isolated phenomenon might be a worldwide network of supernatural threats, each with its own territorial boundaries and predatory habits. There's Newton's, Bobby said as we approached the auto shop. The parking lot appeared deserted. No sign of the skinwalkers that had attacked us earlier. Looks clear, I said cautiously. Looks can deceive. Bobby parked behind the building, out of sight from the street. I'll grab what I need to fix your car. You watch the perimeter. Anything moves wrong, you holler. I stood guard, knife in hand, while Bobby gathered tools and the replacement radiator. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car engine made me flinch. The bright afternoon sun offered little comfort now that I knew darkness merely drove these creatures into hiding, not away. 20 minutes later, we were working on my Toyota. Bobby's hands moved with practiced speed, installing the new radiator while I assisted as best I could. "What about the other ones?" I asked quietly. "Dave and the others. Will they come back?" "Not in daylight," Bobby replied, tightening a bolt. "They'll be regrouping. Probably return to one of their nests deeper in the woods." "Nests?" "Places where the veil is thinnest. Old caves, abandoned structures with history. Spots where terrible things happened, leaving psychic wounds." He connected the last hose and stood back. "That should do it. Let's add coolant and see if she starts." The Toyota's engine turned over on the first try, settling into a smooth idle. Relief washed over me at this first piece of good news all day. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "For everything." Bobby wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Don't thank me yet. You've still got to make it out of Newton County alive." I glanced at my watch, 3:22 p.m. At least 4 hours of daylight remained. Plenty of time to put distance between myself and this place. "Remember White's highway rules," Bobby said, handing me the paper I'd stuffed in my pocket during our hasty escape. "And this." He gave me the cloth bag White had prepared. I hung it from my rearview mirror as instructed. It smelled of herbs and something metallic. "One more thing," Bobby said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small silver pendant on a leather cord, a protection symbol similar to the one Maggie had worn. "Local tradition. Might help, might not, but we believe it offers some protection on the road." I slipped it over my head, tucking it beneath my shirt. "I'll take all the help I can get." As I prepared to leave, Bobby handed me a handwritten map. "Safest route out of the county. Avoids the back roads where they like to set up traps." The highlighted route would take me east toward Harrison, then north to the Missouri border, avoiding the more remote sections of highway where my original encounter had occurred. "What about you?" I asked. "Those things saw you helping me. They'll come for you." Bobby shrugged. "Been dealing with them my whole life. Got my rules, my protections. I'll manage." He offered his hand. "Safe travels, James Daniels. Don't come back to Newton County." We shook, and I climbed into my repaired car, checking White's list of highway rules one more time before putting the Toyota in gear. As I pulled onto Main Street, I caught a glimpse of a blue pine tree pin glinting in the sunlight, the waitress from earlier, watching me from the doorway of a shop. She made no move to follow, but the knowing smile on her face suggested I wasn't escaping, merely being allowed to leave. For now. The Toyota handled smoothly as I navigated through Jasper, following Bobby's map toward the county line. Route 7 stretched ahead, winding through the densely forested Ozark Hills. My gas tank read 3/4 full, enough to cross into Missouri without stopping. White's highway rules lay unfolded on the passenger seat. I'd already memorized them, but their presence reassured me. The cloth bag dangled from my rearview mirror, swaying gently with each curve in the road. I kept my windows closed despite the afternoon heat, following rule number 2. The air conditioning worked well enough to keep me comfortable, though the vents occasionally emitted a musty scent, as if something had nested in the system while the car sat idle. My phone showed 2 bars of reception, enough to attempt another call to my sister. This time, Sarah answered clearly. "James? Where are you? I've been worried sick since you called at that ungodly hour." "Leaving Jasper now. Car's fixed." I kept my explanation vague, unsure how much to share about the events of the past 2 days. "Should be back on the road to Little Rock soon." "Don't come straight here," Sarah said, her tone urgent. "Head to Memphis instead. I'll meet you there tomorrow." "What? Why?" "Just trust me. I've heard stories about that region. Knew it as soon as you mentioned Whispering Pines." Her voice dropped. "That place has a reputation among certain circles." "What circles?" "Folklorists, paranormal researchers." She paused. "Our grandmother grew up near there, remember? She had stories, rules to follow in the mountains." A chill ran through me. "You knew about this? Why didn't you ever mention it? Would you have believed me? Tales about shape-shifting creatures in the woods?" She sighed. "I thought they were just regional legends until your call. The revelation that this knowledge existed in my own family history stunned me. How many other families carried similar secrets, passing down protective rules through generations?" "Stay on main roads," Sarah continued. "Drive east to Mountain Home, then take 62 all the way to the Mississippi. Text me every 30 minutes. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling state police." "I will," I promised, oddly comforted by her protective instincts. "See you in Memphis." The call ended as I passed the "now leaving Jasper" sign. The forest grew thicker outside town limits, pressing close to the roadway. Shadows lengthened as the afternoon progressed, though sunset remained hours away. I drove steadily, maintaining the speed limit exactly. Not too fast to attract police attention, not too slow to make myself vulnerable. The car radio picked up only static on most stations, though occasionally a country music channel would break through. 20 miles outside Jasper, I spotted my first anomaly. A deer stood motionless by the roadside, watching my approach. Nothing unusual about wildlife in these mountains, except this deer had a splash of blue across its flank, exactly like the marking White had warned about in Rule 7. I pressed the accelerator as instructed, heart racing. In my rearview mirror, I saw the deer step onto the road behind me, still watching. It didn't move like a normal deer. Its joints seemed to bend in unnatural directions. The highway curved ahead, taking me out of sight of the creature. I maintained my increased speed for several miles, constantly checking mirrors for pursuit. An hour into my journey, I reached the turnoff for Mountain Home. So far, I'd followed Sarah's directions and Bobby's map without incident, sending regular text updates to my sister. The sun hung lower now, perhaps 2 hours from setting. I'd reached the Missouri border before dark if I maintained my pace, crossing out of the skinwalkers' territory according to White's information. At a rural intersection, I stopped at a red light. No other cars waited with me, the countryside quiet save for the hum of my engine. In the stillness, a faint tapping sound caught my attention, like fingernails drumming on glass. I froze, listening. The sound came again, from the rear passenger window. Slowly, I adjusted my rearview mirror. Nothing appeared in the back seat. Yet the tapping continued, growing more insistent. The light turned green. I accelerated perhaps faster than necessary, and the tapping stopped. 10 minutes later, my radio switched stations by itself, jumping from static to a clear signal. A woman's voice emerged mid-sentence. "James? Can you hear me? It's Sarah. I've been trying to reach you. Your phone isn't working." I remembered Rule 3. If your radio changes stations by itself, turn it off immediately. My hand shot out, punching the power button. The voice cut off mid-word. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool air blowing from the vents. That hadn't been Sarah. My sister had no way to broadcast over radio frequencies. The realization that they were still trying to trick me, still hunting me, sent fresh adrenaline coursing through my system. The road ahead stretched empty into the distance. No cars in sight, either ahead or behind. The isolation suddenly felt threatening rather than reassuring. Near the town of Yellville, I spotted a hitchhiker on the roadside. An elderly man with his thumb extended, a small duffel at his feet. As I approached, he turned toward my car. My father's face stared back at me. My father, who had died 3 years ago from heart failure. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white, and pressed down on the accelerator. Rule 4. Don't pick up hitchhikers, no matter how desperate or familiar they appear. The thing wearing my father's face tracked my car as I passed, its head rotating too far to be natural. In the mirror, I watched it recede into the distance, still staring after me. The encounters were escalating, becoming more personal, more targeted. They knew me now, knew my family, knew what forms would tempt me to stop or respond. Highway 62 was busier as I approached Mountain Home, the largest town in the area. Other vehicles on the road provided a sense of normalcy, of safety in numbers. I relaxed slightly, allowing myself to believe I might actually escape. At a four-way stop, I noticed a blue minivan waiting to turn. Something about it triggered a memory. I'd seen that vehicle before, back near Jasper, parked at a gas station, and again about 20 miles back, pulled to the shoulder with hazard lights flashing. Rule 5. If you see the same vehicle 3 times, exit the highway and find a church. I turned right at the intersection, deviating from my planned route. A small Methodist church stood 2 blocks down the street, its white steeple visible above the trees. I pulled into the parking lot and cut the engine. The church door stood open, warm light spilling onto the steps. An evening service must be underway. I hurried inside, taking a seat in the back pew. The familiar rhythms of the service, hymns, prayers, scripture readings, provided strange comfort after the uncanny experiences of the highway. I stayed for 30 minutes, enough time to break any pursuit pattern according to White's theory. When I emerged, the sun hung just above the western horizon. Perhaps an hour of daylight remained. Back on the road, I drove with renewed focus. Mountain Home gave way to more rural stretches as Highway 62 cut eastward. The traffic thinned again, though not to the isolation of the earlier roads. A black SUV appeared behind me, tailgating aggressively. I maintained my speed, unwilling to pull over despite the driver's flashing headlights. When a vehicle suddenly rammed my rear bumper, I remembered Rule 6. Don't stop if someone rear-ends you. Drive to the nearest populated area. The impact jolted me forward against my seatbelt. My Toyota fishtailed slightly before I regained control. In my mirror, the SUV prepared for another strike. I spotted a gas station ahead, its lot filled with evening customers. I accelerated toward it, horn blaring to draw attention. The SUV fell back slightly but continued to follow. I screeched into the gas station, pulling directly in front of the convenience store entrance where witnesses stood. The SUV drove past slowly, its tinted windows concealing the driver. I caught a glimpse of a blue pine tree air freshener hanging from its mirror before it disappeared down the highway. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The close call had shaken me, but the gas station's bright lights and normal human activity helped steady my nerves. I sent Sarah another text update, then checked my map. The Missouri border lay just 30 miles ahead. According to White, crossing state lines would weaken the skinwalker's ability to pursue me. Back on the road, I drove with heightened vigilance. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. True night would follow soon, bringing with it the skinwalker's hunting forms, according to White. Signs for the Missouri border appeared, counting down the miles. 10 miles to go. 5. 2. As darkness settled fully over the landscape, I spotted the Welcome to Missouri sign ahead, illuminated in my headlights. Relief surged through me. Then my headlights caught something standing in the road at the state line, a figure that hadn't been there seconds before. A woman, her features obscured by distance. As I drew closer, her face became clear. My sister Sarah stood directly on the border, smiling and waving me down. Rule 7 echoed in my mind. If you see a deer or animal with a blue marking, accelerate. But this wasn't an animal. This was my sister, or something wearing her appearance, and it stood precisely at the boundary between states, as if testing a theory about territorial limitations. The speedometer read 65 miles per hour. The figure made no move to flee my approach. I had seconds to decide, brake or accelerate. My foot hovered over the brake pedal, instinct fighting against the rules I'd been taught to follow. The creature wearing Sarah's face smiled wider, arms outstretched welcomingly, confident in my hesitation. At the last possible moment, I slammed my foot down on the accelerator. The Toyota surged forward. The figure's smile faltered, replaced by a snarl that stretched too wide for a human face. As my bumper made contact, the creature's form seemed to ripple and distort. For a split second, I glimpsed something else beneath the human disguise, something ancient and terrible. Then I was across the state line, the impact nothing more than a slight thump, as if I'd hit a cardboard cutout rather than a solid being. In my rearview mirror, the Missouri welcome sign stood alone. No body on the road. No sign of Sarah, or the thing that had worn her appearance. I drove another hour into Missouri before stopping at a well-lit truck stop teeming with travelers. Only then, surrounded by the bustle of normal human activity, did I allow myself to believe I might have escaped. The Chicago winter wrapped the city in snow and silence. From my apartment window, I watched pedestrians navigate icy sidewalks 20 stories below, their breath clouding in the frigid air. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware of what lurked in certain forgotten corners of America. I hadn't published my Ozark hiking trail photos. The assignment remained unfulfilled, costing me the Outdoor America contract. Some prices are worth paying. My phone chimed. Sarah, checking in as she did every week since Memphis. We'd spent 3 days there comparing notes, piecing together our grandmother's fragmented stories about the Arkansas hills she'd escaped as a young woman. The rules she'd taught our mother, who dismissed them as superstition and never passed them down. Still watching the doors and windows. Sarah's text read, "Always," I replied. Some habits became permanent after Newton County. Salt lines at my thresholds, iron horseshoes above doorways. The silver pendant Bobby gave me, never removed. Excessive, perhaps. White had said the creature's power diminished with distance from their territory. Chicago should be well beyond their reach. Should be. My laptop screen displayed my latest project, a private digital archive documenting protective rules from various regions. Forums dedicated to local folklore and regional superstitions proved surprisingly rich sources. Behind innocent-seeming traditions lurked genuine protective measures passed down through generations. Don't whistle at night in Maine coastal towns. Avoid eye contact with roadside hitchhikers in New Mexico. Never enter certain abandoned mining tunnels in northern Minnesota. The wall above my desk held a map of the United States marked with pins. Red for confirmed sightings of phenomena matching the skinwalker's description. Yellow for possible related entities. Blue for zones with established protective rules. The patterns told a disturbing story of a nation secretly sharing space with the unexplainable. My phone rang. An Arkansas area code I didn't recognize. I almost declined before curiosity won out. "Hello? Daniels?" A familiar gravelly voice. "It's White." My pulse quickened. "How did you get this number?" "Your sister gave it to me. We've been comparing notes." A pause. You making use of what you learned? I'm documenting everything. Rules, sightings, theories. Good. White sounded genuinely pleased. Knowledge preserves lives. Why are you calling? He hesitated. Found something you should know. They remember individuals who harm them. Pass those memories to others of their kind, even across distances, like a supernatural wanted list. A chill ran through me. You're saying they're still looking for me? Not actively hunting, no. But if you ever crossed paths with one of their kind elsewhere. He left the implication hanging. How many kinds are there? More than I once thought. They have cousins, distant relations, different hunting grounds, different rules, same fundamental nature. I glanced at my map, the web of connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. I've been tracking similar entities. Figured you might. White sounded unsurprised. That's why I'm calling. There's been activities in northern Illinois, reports matching their behavioral patterns. My mouth went dry. Chicago? Not yet. Rural areas, small towns. For now. For now, I echoed. Just be vigilant, White advised, and maybe draft a new set of rules. Urban environments have different requirements. After we hung up, I stood at my window watching night settle over Chicago. Millions of lights glowed in the darkness, a constellation of human presence holding the shadows at bay. I opened my desk drawer and removed a notebook containing draft rules for city dwellers. Precautions against things that might slip through urban cracks. Parking garages after midnight. Specific subway cars that sometimes miss their stops. Elevators that occasionally opened onto floors that shouldn't exist. The weight of the knowledge pressed down on me. Once you'd seen behind the curtain, you couldn't unsee it. Couldn't unlearn the truth that the world operated under different rules than most people realized. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Call me. Found Grandma's journal. I glanced once more at the city below, at the unsuspecting people moving through pools of streetlight, following sidewalks and crosswalks and traffic signals. Human rules for a human world. They had no idea about the other rules. The ones written in fear and survival. The ones that kept the darkness at arm's length. I picked up the phone and dialed my sister. Some knowledge demands to be shared. Some rules need to be followed. And some stories, like what happened at Whispering Pine Motel, serve as warnings for those with the wisdom to listen.